If you are an adult adoptee from a closed adoption, you think about finding your biological mother. One of the biggest questions you probably have is, does she want me to find her? Hi, I'm Jenny Wallentine. I was almost 30 years old when I finally found my birth mom. I want to share with you my story. I am also the co-founder of Origins Genealogy, a company dedicated to reuniting adult adoptees with their birth families. If you are looking for a birth father or mother or biological siblings, you can contact me directly at the number listed at the end of this video. So here's my story. When I was 17 years old, I helped my mom with a lot of things that she did, but she happened to get sick one day and we took her into the doctor and she found out that she had cancer. It was grueling for her and it was really hard to watch her suffer because, you know, that was the only mom I knew. Of course, this is my adopted mom that I'm talking about. And I don't like the word adopted because to me, she was every bit my mom. It didn't matter that she wasn't biologically related to me. Anyway, long story, during her cancer, one day I'd asked her if there was anything I could do to help her. And she asked me to find my biological parents. Without thinking, of course, I wanted to do anything I could for her because I knew how bad she was suffering. I said, of course, I promised I would do that. When I left the hospital that day, I realized I had no idea how to find them. I knew absolutely nothing about them. I didn't know their names, where they were from, their ages, absolutely nothing. Unfortunately, a few weeks later, my mom did pass away, and we buried her the day that I graduated from high school. Sorry, it's been over 30 years, but it's still an emotional thing for me. The next month was July, and I would happen to turn 18. Instead of having a birthday party like most people do with friends and family, I chose to go to the adoptions agency where I was adopted from. My hope was that I could learn anything possible about my birth parents. And to be honest, I was kind of hoping that they would tell me their names. If you've been adopted, you know that doesn't happen in closed adoptions. And so when I left the adoption agency, the only thing I had was an 8.5 by 11 inch piece of paper that contained what they call non-identifying information about my birth parents. It doesn't sound very much, but it was really cool for me because it's the first time I had learned anything about my parents. If you're wondering what non-identifying information means, this is things like the year they were born, where they were born, their hair color, their eye color, what they did for a living, if they liked any kind of hobbies or things like that, or if they even were a member of a religion. Some of the things kind of surprised me, and then other things really didn't surprise me. Things like my parents had dark hair and my mom had blue eyes. That didn't surprise me because I have dark hair and I have blue eyes. Well, as you can see, I used to have all dark hair. Now I'm starting to get some gray hair, but I guess that comes with wisdom, right? So while you might think I was kind of discouraged with that because it didn't really help me, I actually was really motivated and encouraged to keep going and keep looking. What I didn't realize was it would take me another 12 years of constantly searching to find my birth mom. Once I had gone through all that process of looking at vital records and things like that, I learned a few things that you may know, that all adoptees have 2 birth certificates. What I didn't realize is the first birth certificate is what you get when you are born, lists your birth mom, and for mine I was known as baby girl with the last name of my birth mom. And then what I had learned is that when you're adopted, that original birth certificate gets sealed and it is no longer accessible, and you get a new one with your new birth or with your new adopted parents, and that's your new name. So I kept looking for years trying to find that, and it didn't work. With years of trying to find my mom or my dad, I had a lot of frustrating moments, tons of emotion. I would go down rabbit holes thinking that for sure I was on the right track, only to end up with a dead end or a door slammed in my face. Once I finally had located my birth mom, or the lady who I thought it might be, I had to decide, how do I contact her, right? I knew I wanted to talk to her, but there was that fear of rejection. I think in our society, we talk about babies that are, quote, given up for adoption. I don't like that term, because given up to me sounds like you're discarded, like you're an old toy that you no longer want. There's something better to replace you. And it leaves you with that feeling of being rejected. So knowing that I wanted to call my mom, I was, having to deal with the fact I might be rejected again, a second time. And that's really, really hard to accept. It's not easy to be rejected by anyone, but especially by a biological parent. So I had to consider that. But I also knew that if my biological mom was anything like me, I already had children at that time. I had 3 daughters. I would have done anything to know everything I could about my kids, especially if I had given one up, as you call it, given one up, or placed one for adoption. I would love to know anything I could. So I came up with a plan with a friend of mine who had helped me search during these 12 years, that we would call this lady, who we thought was my mom, and my friend would do the talking. We kind of knew that from some of the case studies we had heard about, it was a lot easier if it was a neutral person who called rather than the actual adoptee. So the plan was my friend would call and talk to her. And one thing I wanted was, I wanted my friend to be honest with her. I didn't want her to lead her on. I just wanted her to be honest and tell her why she was calling. But in case my mom did, quote, reject me, I would listen on the other line so that I could at least hear her voice. That sounds probably silly if you haven't been adopted, but if you have been adopted, you totally get it, because it's weird to think you go all your life never hearing the voice of your parents. So we placed that call one evening in February of 1998, and my mom answered, and my friend said hello, and my mom asked who it was calling, because she did notice it was a long distance number. So my friend was honest and told her who she was, and that she was calling because she wanted to know if this lady remembered my birth date. Now, remember, I was almost 30 years, so if this wasn't my mom, she would have probably said no. But when my friend asked her if she remembered the date of my birth, my mom gasped, and I knew we had finally found my mom. It's an emotional time when you realize you've actually completed the search and you found her. My mom told my friend that I was a complete secret and nobody in her family knew about me. In the time that I was born in the 60s, unfortunately, society kind of shamed unwed mothers, and my mom was one of those that had to move away from her town to keep it, quote, a secret. So this was a heavy, heavy burden. And my immediate thought was, wow, I can't imagine the weight that's put on my mom for 30 years to never have told anybody about me. My mom was thrilled to know that I was a girl. Now that probably sounds kind of weird, but my mom was so upset about having to place me for adoption that she had asked the doctors and nurses to knock her out so that she would not know my gender. She felt that not knowing would maybe make it easier for her. And actually it did, because she already had a older boy. So I had a brother that was older than I was, and I think if she had known I was a girl, it would have made it harder for her to leave me there. So during that phone call, my friend told her as much as she could about me, but my mom also mentioned that she couldn't talk long because her husband was coming home from work soon. So she took down the number and promised that she would call. So my friend hung up and told her thank you. And as you can imagine, that night, I didn't sleep much at all. I couldn't stop my mind from racing, the emotions. I was happy. I was sad for my mom, what she had to go through. But I also, was wondering questions like, is this going to be good for my mom? Does she need to tell anybody? I didn't want to make it worse for her. I worried about that. I never had felt any anger towards my birth parents. My parents that adopted me were always very good to tell me that even though they didn't know much about my parents, they had to have been wonderful people because they produced me. And that always made me feel really good about them. So I did have a lot of sympathy and compassion for my mom. And I was just sure that the next day my mom would call. So as you can imagine, when I woke up the next morning, anytime that phone rang, I ran to the phone. But that whole day came and she never called. So I started thinking, maybe she had changed her mind, had some second thoughts about it, and realized it might be harder to tell people about me or keep me a secret and have anything to do with me. So I tried to stay positive because I'm a pretty positive person, and day 2 came. Same thing, no call. By day 3, I was pretty much sure that something had gone wrong, and I thought, wow, I'm going to be rejected again. And I kept thinking, no, that can't be my mom. If she's anything like me, there's no way. So day 3, absolutely no phone call from her. And the same thing on day 4, until about 10 o'clock that night. And the phone rang, and I thought, who's calling me at 10? Everybody knows I'm going to be heading to bed. I picked up the phone, and it was my friend who had actually called my mom, and she said, guess what? And I said, what? She said, your mom just called me. And I said, you've got to be kidding me. And she said she'd like you to call her. And I said, oh my gosh, I can't believe this. And once again, I felt a ton of emotion coming over me. Even now, it's been over 30 years now 25 years that I'd known my mom. And I remember clear as can be what the emotions I felt like. I was really excited, but I was also kind of nervous. And one of the things that I kept wondering about was, what do I call her? Do I call her Mom? Do I call her Peggy? That was her name, right? I wanted to call her what she felt comfortable with, but I didn't know. So without knowing, I started dialing, and my hand was shaking. It was very, very kind of confusing to know and understand and process all these emotions. So I dialed, it started ringing, and 2 rings later, she said, hi, Jenny. And I said, hi, Mom. And I had no idea what she would say or even why I said it. It just kind of felt right. And she said, I am so glad you feel you can call me that. And I told her, of course. I said, I've been lucky to have 2 moms. And I said, I know you placed me for adoption, but that doesn't change the fact you're still my mom. And I'm thrilled to be able to know you. And she started crying, and I was crying, and we had about a 2.5-hour conversation, and we talked about everything that you can think of. Things like that are kind of silly. Like, she asked me what my bra size was. That's a weird question, right? But things like my shoe size. And it turns out my mom and I share the same bra size and the same shoe size. So funny things like that. She asked me about my parents. She was very, very considerate about them and was grateful for them. She asked me if I still lived in Utah, because that's where she had come to give birth to me and place me for adoption. And of course I did. And it was a really, really touching phone call. Right at the end, after I told her I know it was getting late, her time, because she lived east of me and the time was later, I said, I want you to know something, Mom. And she said, okay, but before you tell me that, can I tell you something? And I said, well, of course. And she said, Jenny, I want you to know I love you. And sorry, that was exactly what I was going to tell her. And it was probably the best thing she could have told me, because I knew that my mom loved me and that I wasn't an embarrassment to her, and that I wasn't just something she wanted to, quote, give away, that it was a hard situation for her. So I told her thank you and told her that I loved her, and I had always loved her and thought about her often. She mentioned to me that she had thought about me every day of her life. And one of the most ironic things is that her husband that she was married to, of course he's older than I am, but his birthday is the same day as mine. So I felt so bad for my mom to know that every birthday that came around for her husband, that she baked a cake, had a party, was celebrating. Silently, she was wondering about me. Was I a boy or a girl? Was I alive? Was I having a good life? And I just felt so bad for her and the weight that she had to have carried. So she was ready to say goodbye, and I was ready to say bye, but she told me to call her every day, call her anytime. And I did. For the next couple of weeks, we talked on the phone for hours. And 3 weeks after we first talked, my mom flew to Salt Lake, and I was able to meet her for the first time. That was 1998. And I had a relationship with my mom, and she told my grandpa, who was still alive, how cool is that? He was in his 80s. I was able to meet him, and my 3 siblings that she had from other relationships. And for 18 years, I had a relationship with her until she passed away in 2016. My children were able to know her, their grandma, know their great-grandpa. She came out for my children's dance recitals, for their baptisms in our church. And we just had a wonderful relationship. And for me, it was important for my mom to know that I was really grateful for her. I knew she could have an abortion, or could have left me in a dumpster, right? You hear about those stories, or left at a hospital or on a fire station door. And I knew it took a lot of courage for my mom to do what she did. So I was very appreciative of that. During our relationship, it was a lot of fun, because we did have a lot of similarities. Not everything, of course, but I looked like my mom and had her same coloring. I tan very easily like she does. Just neat things like that. I love to cook like she did. I like a clean house, things like that. Things that are kind of funny, that if you are raised with your biological parents, you kind of take for granted, but as an adoptee, you want to learn to know. I can say that my mom was thrilled that I found her, and I think most birth moms are that way as well. So I didn't get rejected again, and I really never felt I was rejected in the first place, but many adoptees do. So I know that's a question that many of you are wondering about. Am I going to be rejected again? And it's a fear that I shared, and it's a real fear, right? It's not something to be made fun of or made light of. So if you're wondering if your birth mom will welcome a reunion, I don't know her situation or your story, but I can say it's probably a risk worth taking. I know it was for me. It's true that a few birth moms aren't welcoming, but it is rare. Most of the clients I have had the same experience I did, with a warm welcome and a reunion. Many, in fact, most birth moms spend their entire lives thinking about the child they place for adoption and dreaming of the day that they can be reunited. So if you're going to look for your birth mom, I really wish you all the best. It is a big decision. If there's anything I can do to help, please call me at 801-500-0900. I look forward to hearing from you and helping you find the answers that you deserve and that you desire.